It's that festive time of the year, and I thought I would show you a few ideas that you can use on your website to show that you're not an Ebenezer Scrooge, but more of an Ebenezer Good. Let's dive in. Okay, so as it's Christmas, the first thing that I thought I'd try and put on my website is some snowflakes. So I went over to CodePen and I found this pen that seems to fit the bill. So credits to AlphaDex, and I'll put the link for this code pen in the description below so that you can find it as well. So let's jump back over to my site, and there's a few changes that I need to make because obviously I'm not going to be able to see any snowflakes on a white background like this. So let's jump over to VS Code and go and fix up some of this. So in the header, I want to go and look at the styles for the menu container, which is this div that surrounds the whole of the header element. So I just need to put a style in for this to make it go from a linear gradient to transparent so that you can kind of see things underneath at the bottom. So let's just save that. And then in the main layout, again, I've got this main layout div, and I want to change the background of that to something a little bit darker. So let's just drop in a background on that. And I'm also going to put in some padding at the top of the container and change the text color now that we've changed the background. So let's just jump back over and see what that looks like. So we've darkened our header down a little bit, and we've got a nice dark background now on our main area of our page so that we can actually see some white snowflakes if we put them on there. So how do we do the snowflakes? So if we jump back over and just have a look at the code pen again, so it's an SCSS and it's literally generating a bunch of elements for however many snowflakes you want. So there's a range, a min and a max, and if I view the compiled CSS instead, then what you see is it generates a lot of snow elements, so 9, and then some keyframes around that, and then it generates a 10th, etc., up to however many snowflakes you want. So what I would suggest you do is copy this compiled CSS down based on however many snowflakes you want. So the total snowflakes, as we can see, is set to 200 in this case, which seems to give us a pretty nice spread. So what I'm going to do is view the compiled CSS again and just copy all of that, come back over to VS Code. Inside my CSS assets, I'm going to create a new file called snowfall.css and paste that in. So now I've got 200 snowflakes essentially in here that will animate themselves. I just need to get rid of some of this boilerplate stuff out of here. So I don't want body, and for snow I want to change the Z index on here to something large so that it shows up over everything else on my site. So that's given me a CSS file. So let's jump over to the Nuxt config and go and add that into my CSSs. So in there, snowfall.css, and then in the main app view is where I'm going to add this in. So right above where, in fact, I'm going to surround all of this with a div because I need a root element, and then above the Nuxt layout I'm going to put in another div with a class of snow container, and then iterate for 100, creating 100 elements with a class of snow. So that'll do for now. We'll start with 100 and see what we get, and then I need to add in some styling on that snow element. So let's add in our style section, and then I'm just going to drop in a snow container, which is a top left, position fixed, and it's 100% of the viewport. So it takes up basically the entire page. It's positioned in the top left, takes up the entire width, the entire height. It's got a Z index of a large number, so it sits over everything else, and it doesn't accept any pointer events. So this is quite crucial in that it allows all mouse events and clicks and pushes and buttons and stuff like that to flow through to the underlying layers. So it ignores any mouse interaction or keyboard interaction that you make on that particular layer effectively. So it is just a layer a visual layer that sits over the top of everything else. So let's save that and let's come over to the page, and there we go. We can see we've now got Snowfall falling over the top of everything on the page, but I can still click to the underlying pages as I would do, so my site is still interactive and works exactly as I expect it to. And this has got 100 snowflakes on it, so it's really easy for me to just come back over to the app view, change that to a larger number, and that's now the maximum that I can support, and I've got more of a blizzard going on if that's what you want. So that's a really easy effect to give you some snowflakes. So let's move on and let's look at something else. So what else can we do to make our site a little bit more festive? So another code pen that I found, and again I'll put this in the links below, was this one for Christmas lights. So let's just collapse that up. We've got all these nice lights that are all blinking away. Now these have got links on them, but I decided I didn't really want to go for that. So the effect that I wanted was to have those lights hanging nicely underneath my menu. So let's go and see how we can do that. So let's close some of this out for now. I can get rid of that. Let's create a new component, because we obviously want to make this componentized as much as we can in true Vue style. So let's, in our components, create a Christmas lights Vue file, and let's create our template in here. And we're also going to need a script section. Let's do that, and let's also put a style section in as well, just while we're here. Okay, right, so let's create a div of type with the style of Christmas lights, which would be good if I could spell Christmas. It's too long a word for me. Christmas lights, and inside here we'll have a unordered list with a class, and we have a strand of lights, and then obviously within our unordered list we need a list element, and we're going to have an iteration, so we're going to use Vue v4 n in total lights, and we have to give Vue a key for that, so we can set that to n, and we're going to define total lights in the script below. So this is going to create us just a list of lights up to this number of lights, whatever we specify in our script. So let's move on to the script, and let's create that total lights constant, which is a reference variable, and then I'm going to call set lights, which we'll create a function for in a minute, and then we're going to have an on mounted, and we're going to listen for the resize event, and if the window gets resized we're going to recall set lights. So what set lights is going to do is look at the size of the viewport and calculate the number of lights that need to be generated enough to fill the width of the menu. So we don't have a fixed number of lights, we're looking at the actual viewport width and only creating enough lights just to fill that width so that it looks like we've got a string right across our menu. So you'll see how this works in a minute. So now that we've got a mounted and we're listening to that resize, we obviously have to remove that, so we need an unmounted on the resize event. And now let's go and create this set lights function and see what that does. So as I said, set lights is going to calculate the number of lights that we need to cover the width of our site. So we have a fixed constant, which is the width of a single light, which you can work out using the dev tools once you see the single light working. And then we're working out the viewport width, and this is a standard way to work out the viewport width. If you Google around, you'll see that this is the pretty standard way to find out what the width of your page is taking up. And so given that we know those two things, we can therefore calculate the total number of lights is 1 divided by the other. Simple enough maths, nothing too complicated there. So let's save that. Oh, we've got a problem here, so let's go and fix that up so that that matches. Okay, so that's now correct and using our variable. And let's move on to this styling. So let's style our Christmas lights element, and we want that with the no wrap option, so that as it moves off the edge of the page it doesn't wrap around and we get a string of lights underneath our string of lights. We just get a single horizontal strand of lights. Let's style all of our list items with a transition of ½ a second, and let's go and put some styling in to give us our bulb shape. And all of this is coming from the code pen, so let's just save that, and we can see that we've now got enough bulbs to fill across our page. So that's given us our bulb, or the start of our bulb shape. Let's go and use some pseudo elements on each bulb so that we get the top of the bulb using the before pseudo element. And then let's go and style so that we get the string in between each bulb using the after pseudo element. So there we go, we get a nice string going through. So then we can use some styling on just the first and the last child to move the whole string over to the left and get rid of the wire effectively after the last child. That's what that does. So that moves all that over so that we get a string right across our site now. And then we need to handle different colors. We've only got some red bulbs at the moment, so let's change the styling on some different children so we get some nice green bulbs coming in, and also some yellow ones now. So that's how we can do that. And then you'll see that these are using different animations, so flash 3, flash 2, and the main one was using flash 1. So let's go and add those animations in so that we start to see our lights flashing. So flash 1, and we get our red bulb flashing. Flash 2, and we get our green ones going. And flash 3, and we get our yellow ones going. So now we've got a nice random set of flashes, but we can do a little bit more in terms of randomizing those flashes up. So if we get the odd children, we can change the duration so that they don't all flash at the same time at the same rate if they're the same color. And likewise, you can just add in a different one of those as well to change that duration so that we get some real random kind of string flashing effect going across the whole string of lights. And that's it for the lights. So we've now got, if I expand that out, a nice string of flashing lights right across our nav menu, still with our snow underneath it. And if I come over to my main page, so where's my pages? Let's go to main page, and inside of here just put in a div with a lorem of 50 in it. Let's just put some of these down the page just to fill the page out. We can see that now as I scroll down, the text scrolls underneath the lights and underneath my menu, as I would expect, right down to the bottom of the site. So that's Christmas lights and snow. So what else can we do? Well, it's Christmas, isn't it? So we need a Father Christmas, I think. So let's go and have a look at what we can do for showing a message from Santa. And for this, I'm going to lean on someone else's CSS again. So I'm going to pop up a Santa and get him to show a speech bubble And for the speech bubble, I'm going to use this CSS here from Pure CSS Speech Bubble. So well done to Nicholas Gallagher for creating this. But I'm going to pinch some of your CSS to show my speech bubble. So let's go and do as we did before and create ourselves a new component. And let's call it Popup Santa Vue. And let's go and add Popup Santa into our main app view. So in here, right before the closing div, let's just go and add our Popup Santa component. And over in my assets folder, I've already downloaded an image from the internet to give me a nice Santa image that I can put a speech bubble from. So I've got that in my assets images folder. Let's close our app view and let's work on our Popup Santa. So let's do our usual, add our template in. So inside of our template, let's go and add div, and we're going to give it a class of Santa Popup, and we're also going to reference it here, and we'll see why a bit later, but I'm going to reference that in our JavaScript code. So within that div, I want to have a block quote, which is where our text lives. And again, I want to have a reference to that in my script. And I'm going to give that a class of speech bubble and oval speech. And these styles came from that speech bubble website that I just showed you. So that's the text that I want to show inside of the speech bubble. And then last but not least, I want to actually put my Santa image in. So give it a class of Santa image and point it at the Santa image that I've got and give it an alternate just for accessibility reasons. Okay, so that should give me the basis of my div. So let me just go and have a look over here, and I can see I've got a massive Father Christmas with my text right at the bottom of my site, which isn't really what I want. So let's go and do some styling first. So if I scroll right to the bottom of my site so that we can see Father Christmas. So I'm going to style the Santa Popup div as a whole. So now that should get rid of him off the page because he's gone -25 viewport width off the bottom and off to the right. So he's off over to the bottom of the right of the page. He has a huge Z index as well, so that he pops up over absolutely everything. And I've got an animation on there, which I'll define in a moment, which takes half a second. And at the moment, he's got a display of none. So that whole div is completely hidden from the DOM at the moment. And next, I'm going to add in another style. So if the Santa Popup has the style slide, then its animation is pop in for half a second. So let's just go and put pop in, and we can see that at 0 it's exactly the same styling as the default styling for that element, but at 100% it's translated by -21 viewport width and -19 viewport width, but translating on the y-axis. So if I get rid of the display none, you can see that that doesn't change anything down here. So let me come over here, bring up the dev tools, and let's find the Santa Popup. And if in here I give it the slide, we can see he slides in. So that's the idea, and this is what the JavaScript is going to do, is add in that slide styling to my Santa. So then when I remove that slide back off again, okay, he pops straight back out. So let's go and sort out the pop out, which is why this has got a pop out animation on it. So let's go and add pop out into our styles and see what that does. So pop out starts at the -21 that we've set, and then at 100% it's gone back to where it was before. So let's just save that and do that slide test again. So on the Santa Popup, we put in the slide, he slides in, we take the slide back off, and he slides back out. So that's exactly the sort of styling that we're going for here. So that's a good start. So we can get our Santa to pop in when we add the slide style to him. So let's just set that back to none. And let's jump up to the script and see how we actually add that styling into the Santa Popup. What we need is to get the Santa Popup element, and we do that by using the same name that we've specified in our ref. So Santa Popup, if they match, you just give it the ref, and that will give you a reference to that particular div in our case here. So that means we can then do some stuff with it. So I need some constants just so that we can play around with some of the styling. So delay before we show Santa is 5,000 milliseconds or 5 seconds. And then we're going to have a Popup Santa method. So let's go and create that function. So inside Popup Santa, we're going to use the timeout function. So we do a window timeout, and then we do inside here what we actually want that to do. We can do Santa pop-up value class list add slide. So that does exactly what I was doing manually over in the dev tools. Add slide to that Santa pop-up, which will then invoke our animation and slide him in. We also need to change the display before we do that from none as its default, so that the DOM can then see it. So we set that to display block. Then we do our slide, and what we need to do down here is say how long we want before that timeout method kicks in. So we want that to wait for the 5,000 milliseconds before it calls this code here. So when someone goes to our site, it will wait for 5 seconds, then it will show our Santa message. So he's not popping in straight away. But for now, we will set that to half a second just so that we can see what's going on. And then we need to worry about how we actually slide that back out again. So for that, we need another timeout inside of the timeout. So let's do another one of those. For now, let's just set that to 2 seconds. And then what we'll do is we will remove the slide so that he slides out, and then we'll have another timeout function that fires. So we know our slide out is set to half a second in our styling down here. Slide out is set to half a second, so therefore we can set this to a second before we set the display on the Santa pop-up back to its original state of none. So with all of that in place, we get that effect there. So when we go in and refresh our page comes up, Santa comes up, stays there for a bit, and then slides back out. Beautiful. Now about the speech bubble. So let's go and see if we can style up the speech bubble. So for now, just set these to 0, comment out, calling Popup Santa. So there we go, he's visible so that we can see what we're doing with our speech bubble. The speech bubble, most of this has come from that styling, as I said earlier, and I'm following exactly the same approach with this. So this speech bubble is going to fade in, which is why I've got a fade down. So that's what happens when we want it to disappear. It will fade back out again. So I've got a display none on that initially. Let's set our opacity to 1 for now. Okay, so we can see our text is there. So now let's style the actual bubble itself with some styling. So oval speech. So this is what's come from that styling site. So we pop that in and we get a nice linear gradient, and then we need to do some other styling just to make it look a bit nicer. So we change our font size, and before pseudo element creates that nice little speech curve that we see. So that's our speech bubble there and visible, and what it will look like once it's faded up. So just to make it fade up, we want on our speech bubble, we want when we add the dot fade style to it, it will run the fade up for half a second. So we can put that in, and then we can go and change our opacity here back to what it should be. And let's go and add in those animations. So fade up and fade down. So down where all our other animations are. Let's keep all those together at the bottom. So fade up just changes the opacity from 0 to 1, and fade down just changes the opacity from 1 back down to 0, which is the default for that particular element. Again, we can pseudo represent this. If I go and find my block quote, I put against that the fade, then it fades up, which is what I want, and when I take it off, it fades back away again. So that's good. Okay, so let's jump back over here, and just now that we've got all that working, I can set that to display none, so that when Father Christmas comes in, the speech bubble isn't showing or isn't part of the DOM. And let's go and reset Father Christmas back to his proper values so that he slides in. And then let's go and look at the script that we need to write. So I'm going to create a few more. Well, in fact, the first thing I'm going to do is get hold of the reference to the speech bubble. So let's get hold of speech bubble, and then I'm going to have some more constants in here. So we need to have a constant for how long we wait before we show the message text. We need to have a constant for how long we want to show the text for, so Santa message duration. We need to have a constant for how long the animation takes, which is half a second, and then we need to have a delay for how long after we've hidden the message and faded that down we leave Santa on the page before we style him out and slide him back off the page. So we're already using the delay before show, which we've set to 500 milliseconds at the moment. So rather than this 2000 here that we put earlier, we need to have that as the Santa message duration plus Santa message animation duration plus delay before we hide Santa. So it's all three of those added together is how long it will wait before it starts sliding and removing that slide style. So then what we need to do is the first time when we slide Santa in, we need to call a method to show the Santa message. So let's go and create a function for that. And this just keeps the two ideas completely separate. So if you don't want to show a Santa message, you can easily turn it off just by commenting that out. So let's go and do our window set timeout as we've been doing. And inside here, we're going to do exactly what we did for the Father Christmas, but this time for the speech bubble. So we get our speech bubble, we set the display to block, and we add the class of fade. And then we have another timeout method that fires after that, that's going to revert that back after a given time period. And that time period is the Santa message duration. And what we're going to do is remove the fade back off it again. And then just as we did with Santa, we have to have another wait for a second while that fades down before we can actually set the display back to none on the speech bubble. So we're giving it a second, even though the fade only takes half a second, but it just tidies up the DOM back to its original state again. So that gives us our show Santa message. So let's comment back in our Popup Santa call, and the one value I'm not using at the moment is the delay, and that's because I need it here. So that's the delay before we show the Santa message. So Santa starts coming in after 500 milliseconds. We wait 800 milliseconds before we actually show the message. Then we show the message for 5 seconds, and then we start undoing all of that back, so fading out and all sorts. So let's just see what that looks like. So let's refresh our page and start from scratch and see what we get. So he slides in, that pops up, shows a nice message, not too obtrusive on the website, fades down, slides out, and that's it, done. So it's just a nice little pop-up message that you can show to your customers that come to your website without it being too obtrusive. It's not taking up the whole site, and it's gone after 5 seconds of showing, and it just shows a little bit of festive spirit and cheer. And all of these are easy to remove as well. So if we jump back over to our app.vue, because we've componentized all of these things, it's very easy for us in our header to just comment out that until next year, or over in our app view likewise we can just comment out our snow container and our Popup Santa, and we've removed all of our Christmas decorations and put those away ready for next year, which is exactly how it should be. But let me know in the comments, what are you doing on your website to show some festive spirit and cheer? And that's it for this video. I wish you some festive cheer and have a good season, and thanks for watching. And I'd like to put out a special thanks to my sponsors, without whom the channel wouldn't be growing. So thank you for your contributions, and I will see you in the next video.